For years, people have been told that the only way to bring blood sugar down is to cut out the foods they love, live on restriction, and constantly count every gram on their plate. But what if the real problem isn't the carbs themselves, but how the body is processing them? What if the key to lowering blood sugar isn't deprivation, but restoring the natural rhythm of your hormones and allowing your metabolism to work the way it was designed to? When you understand how insulin behaves, how your cells respond to it, and how small daily habits can shift your metabolic balance, you begin to see that blood sugar isn't controlled by fear or strict dieting, but by strategy and awareness. You start to realize that stable energy, clearer thinking, and healthier glucose levels are possible without sacrificing every comfort food. And suddenly, the door opens to a new approach, one based on physiology, timing, and smarter eating patterns rather than rigid rules. Insulin resistance is the real driver of high blood sugar, not carbs alone. And understanding this changes the entire way you think about food, energy, and health. Most people have been taught to blame a single nutrient, to fear carbohydrates as if they're the sole cause of rising glucose. But the deeper issue lies in how the body responds to insulin over time. When insulin levels stay elevated too often, the cells begin to lose sensitivity to its signals, forcing the pancreas to produce even more just to move the same amount of glucose out of bloodstream. This cycle continues quietly for years, long before blood sugar rises on a lab test. And by the time symptoms appear, the body has already spent a long time struggling behind scenes. Carbs become a problem only because the system handling them isn't functioning well, not because the carbs themselves magically cause dysfunction. This distinction matters because it opens up a pathway to change that doesn't rely on restriction, but on restoring the natural balance that once existed in the body. Imagine constantly knocking on a door. At first, the person inside responds quickly, but if you keep knocking repeatedly without giving them a break, eventually they stop reacting. That's essentially what happens with insulin. Every snack, every sugary drink, every constant eating event signals insulin to rise again. And over time, the cells get used to noise. They become numb to the message. What begins as protective adaptation gradually becomes a metabolic problem. Your body isn't broken, it's overwhelmed. So instead of blaming carbs, the real focus becomes improving the environment in which insulin operates. When insulin sensitivity improves, the same bowl of rice, fruit, or bread that used to spike your glucose begins to be handled more smoothly. The body absorbs glucose more efficiently, stores it correctly in muscles and liver, and keeps blood sugar within a safer range without requiring an extreme response. This is why some people can eat carb-heavy diets with low rates of diabetes, while others struggle even with moderate carbohydrate intake. The variation isn't explained by the carbs. It's explained by insulin sensitivity, lifestyle patterns, and metabolic health. Cultures with high carb diets but low rates of metabolic disease typically eat whole foods, avoid constant snacking, and maintain lower baseline insulin throughout the day. Their bodies remain responsive to insulin because they don't constantly overload the system. This shows clearly that the presence of carbs alone isn't the enemy. The enemy is a system that has been overstimulated and overworked for too long. When you address insulin resistance, the entire metabolic picture begins to shift. Energy levels rise because glucose is being delivered to cells efficiently again. Cravings decrease because insulin is no longer trapping fuel and blocking fat from being burned. The mental fog lifts as the brain begins to receive steady energy rather than surges and crashes caused by unstable glucose. Even weight begins to change because the hormonal environment that once favored storage slowly transitions back toward balance. These changes happen not because carbs were eliminated, but because insulin is finally functioning the way it was designed to. The powerful part of this truth is that insulin resistance is not a permanent condition. The body is incredibly adaptive, and when given the right space and signals, it begins to reverse years of hormonal stress. Small shifts in behavior, longer gaps between meals, movement after eating, better sleep, managing stress, choosing food that digest more steadily, create a powerful downward shift in insulin levels. When insulin comes down, sensitivity gradually improves. When sensitivity improves, the body can finally process carbs in a controlled, healthy way. Many people think lowering blood sugar means avoiding every food they enjoy. But the deeper science shows that the real solution lies in healing the metabolic machinery. This approach is more sustainable because it works with your biology rather than fighting against it. It doesn't require punishing restrictions or fear-based eating. It requires awareness of how insulin drives the entire process and how your daily habits influence its behavior. Once this understanding becomes clear, carbs transform from a threat into a tool, something the body can use rather than something it must avoid. The focus shifts from deprivation to restoration, from cutting out food to rebuilding hormonal balance, and from short-term diet rules to long-term metabolic healing. Improving insulin sensitivity allows you to handle carbs more efficiently. And once you understand how this works inside the body, the entire conversation around blood sugar begins to shift. Most people think high glucose comes from eating too many carbs. But the real issue is how well the body responds to insulin when those carbs arrive. When your cells are open and receptive to insulin signal, carbohydrates move smoothly into muscle and liver, where they are used for energy or stored safely. But when those same cells become sluggish or resistant, even a moderate amount of carbs can overwhelm the system, leading to spikes, crashes, and rising insulin levels. The difference between these two states isn't the food on your plate. It's the metabolic environment inside your body. Insulin sensitivity reflects how effectively your body can clear glucose out of the bloodstream. When sensitivity is high, the pancreas doesn't need to release much insulin to get the job done. A small hormonal push moves glucose into the cells with ease. This means you can eat a meal with carbs and experience stable energy, balanced hunger, and steady blood sugar. But when sensitivity drops, the same meal demands a much larger insulin spike. Over time, these heavy insulin responses exhaust the system, promote fat storage, increase cravings, and keep the body locked in a cycle where it cannot use fuel efficiently. Improving sensitivity then becomes one of the most powerful ways to regain control without cutting out entire food groups. What makes this especially important is that insulin sensitivity is influenced by more than food alone. Movement, sleep, stress levels, meal timing, and even the composition of your plate all work together to shape how your body reacts to carbohydrates. For example, when muscles are used regularly through walking, resistance training, or any form of movement, they become hungrier for glucose. They pull more of it from the bloodstream, reducing the load on insulin and making every meal easier to handle. This is why even a short walk after eating can dramatically improve glucose response. Movement makes your body more responsive, and a responsive body manages carbs effortlessly. The timing of meals also plays a significant role. When you give your body space between eating occasions, insulin naturally drops and your cells have a chance to reset. This creates a metabolic rhythm in which insulin sensitivity gradually improves. In contrast, frequent snacking keeps insulin elevated all day, leaving the cells overstimulated and less receptive over time. Even without changing the foods you eat, simply reducing eating frequency can create noticeable improvements in how your body handles glucose. It's not about starvation or harsh restriction. It's about allowing insulin to fall often enough for the system to recover. Food quality matters, too, not because of calories, but because of how different foods interact with insulin. Whole, unprocessed carbs tend to digest more slowly, giving the body time to distribute glucose steadily rather than all at once. Combining carbs with healthy fats, proteins, or fiber can slow absorption even further, reducing the need for dramatic insulin spikes. This balanced, slower release keeps blood sugar steadier and promotes a calmer hormonal response. It's a small shift that makes a big difference in how the body handles fuel. Stress and sleep play powerful roles as well. When the body is under constant stress, cortisol rises and cortisol pushes glucose into the bloodstream, making insulin work harder. Lack of sleep has a similar effect, reducing sensitivity almost immediately. These factors are often overlooked, but improving insulin sensitivity requires treating the body as an interconnected system. Calming the nervous system, restoring sleep, and managing daily stress allow insulin to function more effectively, which in turn makes carbohydrate handling smoother and more predictable. The beauty of focusing on sensitivity rather than restriction is that it empowers you to work with your biology rather than against it. It removes the fear around food and replaces it with an understanding of how the body prefers to operate. When insulin sensitivity improves, meals become less stressful, cravings become quieter, and energy becomes more stable. You stop feeling like food controls you and begin to feel like you understand the signals your body has been giving all along. You realize that the goal isn't to eliminate carbs, but to create a metabolic environment that can process them with ease. This shift becomes a foundation of long-term blood sugar control, not through punishment or extreme dieting, but through rebuilding the body's natural ability to respond to insulin the way it was always meant to. Meal timing has a stronger impact on blood sugar than meal content. And once you begin to see how the timing of your eating patterns influences insulin, the way you look at food completely changes. Most people think controlling glucose is only about choosing the right foods. But even the healthiest meal can create problems if the body is constantly flooded with food signals. Every time you eat, regardless of whether it's a small snack or a full meal, insulin rises to help store or use the incoming energy. When these eating occasions happen back-to-back throughout the day, insulin never truly gets a break. Over time, this constant stimulation leads to elevated baseline insulin levels, making it harder for the body to move glucose out of the bloodstream efficiently. In this environment, even moderate carbs can cause spikes because the underlying hormonal rhythm has been disrupted. When you start to space out your meals, something remarkable happens. Insulin begins to fall between eating windows, giving your cells a chance to reset and become more responsive again. This means that when you do eat, your body handles the meal much more smoothly. It's not the food that changed, it's a hormonal landscape. People often underestimate how powerful this reset period is. In cultures where snacking is uncommon, metabolic health tends to be stronger, not because they follow strict diets, but because their bodies enjoy longer stretches of low insulin throughout the day. These periods allow the body to switch into repair mode, burn stored energy, and maintain glucose stability without constant interference. Meal timing also helps regulate hunger and cravings. When insulin stays elevated due to constant snacking, your hunger signals become confused. The body cannot easily access stored energy. So, you end up feeling hungry even when you've eaten plenty. By giving your system breaks between meals, insulin lowers enough for the body to tap into stored fuel. As this becomes more efficient, hunger normalizes and cravings for quick sugar foods begin to fade. Stable blood sugar becomes something your body naturally maintains rather than something you have to fight for. There's another layer to this. The body has natural rhythms tied to hormones, digestion, and energy use. Eating late at night, for example, often creates larger glucose spikes because the body's insulin sensitivity drops significantly in the evening. People who shift their eating window earlier in the day tend to experience more stable glucose, better sleep, and improved energy. This isn't because they changed what they were eating, but because they aligned their meals with the times when their body was most capable of handling them. Digestive enzymes, insulin sensitivity, and metabolic rate all follow daily cycles. And when you match your meals to these rhythms, your body works with you rather than against you. Another powerful example of timing is fasting. Even short fasting windows of 12 to 16 hours. These windows don't require cutting carbs or following a strict diet. They simply give insulin levels room to fall. As insulin declines, fat burning increases, glucose levels stabilize, and the cells regain sensitivity to insulin. This is why people often report that eating the same meal produces a lower glucose response after they've improved their meal timing. The food didn't change, the internal environment did. Fasting is not about deprivation. It's about restoring the natural ebb and flow of insulin that modern eating patterns have disrupted. Spacing out meals also helps reduce inflammation. Constant eating keeps the digestive system working nonstop, placing stress on the body and leading to chronic low-grade inflammation. When you introduce structured breaks between meals, the digestive system rests, inflammation markers drop, and the body becomes more responsive to hormones like insulin. This improved hormonal balance influences everything from energy levels to mood to sleep quality, creating a ripple effect across all aspects of health. The key realization is that meal timing allows you to manage blood sugar without obsessively tracking carbs, calories, or portions. It shifts the focus from restriction to rhythm. When you eat in a way that respects your body's natural cycles, insulin behaves more predictably, glucose levels remain more stable, and your metabolism functions more efficiently. You begin to understand that control over blood sugar is less about what you eat and more about when you allow your body the space to process and reset. By making timing a central part of your approach, you gain a powerful tool that supports metabolic health, reduces cravings, and allows you to enjoy food without fear or confusion. Reducing snacking lowers insulin levels and stabilizes glucose naturally, and this single shift can transform the way your metabolism functions throughout the day. Most people don't realize that every bite of food, no matter how small, triggers an insulin response. This includes a handful of nuts, the crackers grabbed between meals, the sugary tea, the biscuits, the fruit slices, even the so-called healthy snacks marketed as guilt-free. Every eating event signals the pancreas to release insulin. And when these eating events stack up one after another, insulin remains elevated from morning until night. Over time, this constant stimulation leads to chronically high baseline insulin, which makes it much harder for the body to regulate blood sugar. You may think you're eating lightly because snacks are small, but your hormones experience them as steady interruptions that prevent insulin from ever falling. When insulin stays elevated, your cells begin to resist its signal. This resistance forces the body to produce even more insulin just to handle normal amounts of glucose, creating a cycle where cravings increase, hunger becomes more frequent, and energy levels become unstable. People often think they're hungry because their body needs more food. But in reality, high insulin traps stored energy inside fat cells, making it inaccessible. This leads to a sensation of low energy even when the body has plenty of fuel. Reducing snacking breaks this pattern by giving insulin room to drop between meals. Once insulin falls, stored energy becomes available again, and the body can begin to function the way it was designed to. One of the most significant changes that occurs when snacking stops is the restoration of natural hunger signals. Instead of feeling hungry every couple of hours, hunger becomes more predictable and manageable. The constant roller coaster of glucose spikes and crashes begins to level out. When glucose rises with meal and then falls gradually without being interrupted by extra snacks, the body experiences a smoother metabolic rhythm. This stability reduces cravings for quick sugar foods, decreases a desire to eat out habit or boredom, and improves emotional regulation around food choices. Hunger becomes a true signal rather than a hormonal response triggered by erratic insulin patterns. Beyond hunger control, reducing snacking also improves fat burning. When insulin stays low for longer periods, the body switches from burning sugar to burning stored fat. This metabolic flexibility is essential for stable energy, weight control, and better blood sugar management. People often try to burn fat by cutting calories. But as long as insulin remains elevated, fat burning is severely limited. The simple act of spacing out meals allows insulin to drop far more effectively than constant calorie counting ever could. When the body has time between meals, it naturally transitions into a fat-burning state without needing extreme dieting. Another overlooked benefit of reducing snacks is improved digestion. The digestive system requires significant energy to break down food, absorb nutrients, and move waste. When the system is constantly activated by snacking, it never gets the rest period needed for repair, enzyme production, and gut lining maintenance. This can lead to bloating, indigestion, and inflammation. Allowing the digestive system to rest between meals supports better nutrient absorption and reduces stress on the gut. This improved digestive rhythm contributes directly to better glucose control because a healthier gut means better hormonal signaling and less inflammation. Reducing snacking also affects mental clarity. Glucose instability caused by frequent eating leads to episodes of fatigue, irritability, and difficulty focusing. When meals are spaced out and insulin has room to fall, the brain receives a steady, more balanced supply of energy. Cognitive performance improves, mood stabilizes, and the afternoon crash becomes far less common. People often attribute these improvements to the type of food they're eating. But in reality, the timing and frequency of eating play a far bigger role in maintaining mental sharpness throughout the day. Another powerful effect is a reduction in triglycerides, an improvement in metabolic markers. High insulin contributes to elevated triglycerides, fatty liver, and abdominal fat accumulation. Reducing snacking lowers average insulin levels, allowing the body to clear excess fat from the bloodstream more effectively. This contributes to better liver function, less visceral fat, and improved overall metabolic health. The hormonal shift that occurs simply from eating less frequently leads to measurable improvements without requiring drastic dietary changes. Most importantly, reducing snacks reteaches the body how to rely on internal fuel sources instead of constantly depending on incoming food. This is one of the keys to reversing insulin resistance and stabilizing blood sugar long term. When the body becomes more efficient at switching between energy states, it no longer relies on frequent boosts of sugar. This metabolic flexibility is the foundation of better glucose control, more consistent energy, and healthier eating patterns that feel natural rather than forced. By focusing on reducing snacking, you allow insulin to fall, hunger to normalize, fat burning to increase, and the entire hormonal system to function in a more balanced way. Adding healthy fats and proteins slows carb absorption and reduces spikes. And this principle becomes a powerful tool once you understand how different nutrients interact inside the body. Carbohydrates break down quickly into glucose, which means they can raise blood sugar rapidly when eaten alone. This is why foods like white bread, sugary drinks, or pastries cause sudden spikes followed by sharp crashes. But when you pair those same carbs with fats or proteins, the entire digestive process changes. Instead of rushing through the system, the meal moves more slowly, keeping glucose release steady and manageable. This natural slowing effect reduces the need for large insulin surges, allowing your body to maintain more stable energy levels and preventing the dramatic highs and lows that make blood sugar management so difficult. Healthy fats such as olive oil, avocado, nuts, seeds, and fatty fish act like a buffer during digestion. They delay the emptying of the stomach, ensuring that glucose enters the bloodstream gradually. This reduces a burden on the pancreas and prevents the overwhelming insulin spikes that contribute to insulin resistance over time. Protein has a similar stabilizing effect, although it operates through slightly different mechanisms. Protein not only slows digestion but also promotes satiety, increased metabolic rate, and better muscle function. When the body has sufficient protein, it becomes more efficient at storing glucose in muscles after meals because muscle tissue is a major storage site for glucose. This means that combining carbs with protein doesn't just reduce spikes. It improves overall glucose handling. This combination approach is particularly useful for people who struggle with cravings. When carbs are eaten alone, they produce a fast rise in blood sugar followed by a quick drop. This drop often triggers hunger and the desire for more sugar, leading to a cycle of overeating and fatigue. But when carbs are balanced with fats or protein, glucose levels rise more slowly and decline more gradually, preventing the crash that drives cravings. This stabilizing effect helps people feel fuller for longer, reduces emotional eating, and supports balanced meal patterns throughout the day. It becomes easier to stay satisfied between meals because the body is receiving a more sustained form of energy rather than a sudden burst. Another important aspect of combining carbs with protein and fat is its impact on gut health. The microbiome thrives on a diverse array of nutrients, and balanced meals provide a more favorable environment for beneficial bacteria. Healthy fats support the absorption of fat-soluble vitamins like A, D, E, and K, which play crucial roles in anti-inflammatory pathways and metabolic health. Protein supports tissue repair, hormone production, and the development of lean muscle, which improves insulin sensitivity. When the gut is healthy and hormones function properly, glucose control becomes easier because the entire system is more balanced. This synergy highlights why balanced meals lead to better metabolic outcomes than focusing solely on reducing carbs. The stabilizing effect of mixed meals becomes even more apparent when looking at post-meal energy. People often report feeling sluggish after high-carb meals because glucose spikes and crashes affect the brain. By adding fats and proteins, you create a smoother energy curve that supports cognitive clarity, emotional stability, and physical stamina. Instead of feeling sleepy, irritable, or anxious after eating, you feel more grounded and focused. This improvement in post-meal energy is not due to eating less food, but due to eating food in a way that aligns with the body's natural metabolic processes. Balancing carbs also protects the pancreas over time. When meals cause fewer spikes, insulin production becomes more efficient and less stressful for the body. This reduces the long-term wear and tear that contributes to metabolic disorders. Even small changes like adding a handful of nuts to fruit or pairing rice with fish and vegetables can create meaningful improvements in glucose response. These simple adjustments are sustainable because they don't require removal of favorite foods. Instead, they encourage eating smarter by understanding how nutrients work together inside the body. This approach also helps build metabolic flexibility. When meals contain a mix of carbs, fats, and proteins, the body learns to switch between different fuel sources more easily. This skill is vital for stable blood sugar because it allows the body to use stored energy when needed instead of depending on constant external carbohydrate intake. People often find that once they begin balancing their meals, they naturally reduce snacking and feel more in control of their appetite. This isn't due to willpower, but because their hormonal environment becomes more stable. Ultimately, adding healthy fats and proteins reshapes the entire metabolic response to meals. It supports steadier blood sugar, reduces insulin spikes, enhances digestion, improves satiety, and strengthens the body's ability to manage energy. This simple yet powerful principle provides a sustainable pathway toward better glucose control without relying on strict restriction or carb elimination. Short fasting windows help reset insulin response without cutting foods. And this concept becomes much clearer when you understand how insulin behaves throughout the day. Every time you eat, insulin rises to help move glucose into the cells. This process is natural and necessary. But when eating happens too frequently, insulin stays elevated for long periods, leaving the body with very little opportunity to reset. Over time, this constant stimulation leads to insulin resistance, where the cells become less responsive to insulin signal, forcing the pancreas to produce even more. This cycle pushes blood sugar higher, increases cravings, and creates fatigue. Short fasting windows, even as little as 12 to 14 hours, create the space needed for insulin levels to drop, allowing the body to restore sensitivity and handle food more effectively once eating resumes. These fasting windows are not about starving or removing entire food groups. They're simply about allowing the body to take a break between periods of eating. When you extend a natural overnight fast by delaying breakfast slightly or finishing dinner earlier, insulin has time to fall to its baseline levels. As insulin declines, the body becomes more capable of accessing stored energy, which reduces hunger swings and stabilizes glucose throughout the day. Many people find that after establishing a consistent fasting window, they no longer wake up feeling ravenous. Instead, their hunger becomes steady and predictable because the body has learned to rely on internal fuel sources instead of demanding constant external food. Another powerful effect of short fasting windows is improved metabolic flexibility. When insulin stays low for part of the day, the body begins shifting between burning glucose and burning fat more efficiently. This flexibility reduces cravings for sugary foods, enhances mental clarity, and prevents the midday crash that often comes from unstable blood sugar. Over time, the body becomes more resilient, better able to handle variations in meals, and less reactive to carbohydrates. People often notice that meals that once caused glucose spikes produce a much smoother response after they practice time-restricted eating for several weeks. This happens because the hormonal environment has been recalibrated through periods of low insulin. Short fasting windows also enhance the body's natural repair processes. When you're not eating, the digestive system gets a chance to rest, and the body can redirect energy towards cellular repair, detoxification, and inflammation reduction. These processes are essential for metabolic health because chronic inflammation is closely tied to insulin resistance. By giving the body regular periods of rest, you allow inflammation levels to decrease, hormonal balance to improve, and glucose control to become more stable. This restorative period also supports liver function, which plays a central role in regulating blood sugar. A healthier liver stores and releases glucose more effectively, preventing the erratic surges that contribute to diabetes. Another major advantage of time-restricted eating is its simplicity. Instead of counting calories, weighing food, or eliminating carbs, you focus only on when you eat. This makes the practice accessible and sustainable for nearly anyone. Most people find it easier to follow an eating schedule than to follow a restrictive diet. And because the body quickly adapts, hunger pangs decrease as insulin becomes more stable. This approach removes the fear and stress around food, replacing it with a rhythm that feels natural once the body adjusts. It also aligns with how humans have historically eaten, with natural periods of fasting between meals rather than constant grazing. Short fasting windows also support weight management without requiring harsh dieting. When insulin stays lower for longer periods, the body is better able to access stored fat. This doesn't require extreme fasting or skipping major meals. Even a predictable window like eating between 10 a.m. and 6 p.m. can create meaningful results. As fat burning improves, people notice changes in their waistline, improved energy, and fewer cravings. This isn't due to eating less food, but because the hormonal environment is more favorable for using stored energy rather than storing more. Time-restricted eating also improves sleep and stress regulation, both of which impact insulin. Eating late at night can disrupt sleep because digestion competes with the body's restorative processes. When meals are confined to an earlier window, sleep improves and insulin sensitivity increases as a result. Good sleep supports better glucose control the following day, creating a positive cycle. Likewise, lower insulin levels during fasting windows reduce stress on the body, calming the nervous system and supporting more stable cortisol levels. Since cortisol influences glucose production, this balance contributes to steadier blood sugar overall. The beauty of short fasting windows is that they don't require perfection to deliver benefits. Even practicing them a few days a week can help lower average insulin levels, reduce glucose spikes, improve metabolic flexibility, and promote a calmer relationship with food. By focusing on timing rather than restriction, the body gradually relearns how to operate with efficiency, balance, and hormonal harmony. Prioritizing whole, unprocessed carbs prevents rapid glucose surges. And this becomes a cornerstone of balanced blood sugar once you understand how different types of carbohydrates behave inside the body. Not all carbs are created equal. The structure, fiber content, and level of processing determine how quickly a carbohydrate breaks down into glucose and enters the bloodstream. Highly processed carbs like white bread, pastries, sugary drinks, and refined grains are digested rapidly. They hit the bloodstream almost immediately, causing sharp spikes in blood sugar followed by equally sharp drops. These fluctuations strain the pancreas, elevate insulin levels, trigger cravings, and over time contribute to insulin resistance. Whole unprocessed carbs behave differently because they come packaged with fiber, water, nutrients, and natural structural complexity that slows digestion. Foods like fruits, vegetables, legumes, whole grains, and root vegetables release glucose gradually, giving the body time to absorb and distribute it steadily. This slow release effect reduces the burden on insulin and keeps energy levels consistent. Fiber plays a particularly powerful role. It forms a gel-like barrier in the digestive tract that slows the movement of food, helping prevent rapid glucose entry into the bloodstream. This buffer not only reduces spikes but also improves gut health, supports satiety, and stabilizes appetite. Choosing whole carbs is not about eliminating carbohydrates, but about choosing smarter ones. When people switch from refined carbohydrates to whole foods, they often notice immediate changes in how they feel after meals. Instead of getting sleepy or craving more sugar, they feel satisfied and stable. This is because the body is receiving a balanced release of glucose, not an overwhelming surge. Even fruits, which contain natural sugars, behave differently when eaten whole. Their fiber content slows digestion, and their water content dilutes sugar concentration. This is why eating a whole apple produces a far gentler glucose response than drinking apple juice, even though both come from the same source. The fiber and structure matter. Another advantage of whole, unprocessed carbs is that they support better long-term metabolic health. When the body is consistently exposed to gentle glucose waves rather than extreme spikes, the pancreas doesn't need to work as hard, and insulin remains more stable. Stable insulin helps keep hunger signals balanced and reduces fat storage over time. This leads to improved insulin sensitivity, which makes it easier for the body to handle all types of foods, not just carbs. This is why people who adopt a whole food-based carbohydrate pattern often find themselves more energetic, lighter, and less reactive to meals. Whole carbs also tend to be nutrient-dense, providing vitamins, minerals, antioxidants, and plant compounds that play critical roles in metabolic function. These nutrients help reduce inflammation, support liver function, enhance cellular repair, and improve the body's ability to regulate glucose. Refined carbs, on the other hand, offer calories without these natural supports, making the body work harder while providing less nourishment. When the body receives the nutrients it needs, hormonal balance improves, cravings decrease, and the natural appetite regulation system becomes more efficient. Prioritizing whole carbs also supports gut microbiome diversity. Fiber feeds beneficial bacteria, which produce short-chain fatty acids that improve insulin sensitivity, reduce inflammation, and support overall metabolic health. A healthy gut helps regulate glucose more effectively because gut bacteria interact closely with metabolism and hormones. Diets high in processed carbs starve beneficial bacteria while feeding harmful ones, creating imbalances that contribute to inflammation and insulin resistance. By choosing whole carbs, you nurture a gut environment that supports stable glucose and healthier metabolic responses. Another key benefit of whole carbs is that they naturally encourage healthier eating patterns. Whole foods require chewing, take longer to digest, and create a stronger sense of fullness. This reduces the likelihood of overeating or snacking excessively. The slower digestive pace also keeps glucose levels more stable between meals, which reduces the urge to reach for quick sugar foods. Over time, this stabilizing effect rewires hunger patterns, helping you feel satisfied with fewer calories because your body is processing energy more efficiently. Whole carbs also play a vital role in supporting energy consistency throughout the day. Because they release glucose slowly, they prevent the midday crashes commonly caused by refined foods. This supports better concentration, improved mood, and more stable physical energy. When the brain receives a steady supply of glucose rather than a rapid burst followed by a crash, cognitive function remains sharper. This is why people who switch to whole carbs often report clearer thinking and improved productivity. The power of prioritizing whole carbs lies in their ability to work with your physiology rather than against it. Instead of overwhelming the body with fast sugar, they provide a gentle, balanced supply of energy that the body can manage without stress. This reduces insulin spikes, lowers inflammation, improves hormonal balance, and supports long-term metabolic resilience. By focusing on whole, unprocessed carbohydrates, you give your body the foundation it needs to maintain steady glucose levels, preserve energy, and sustain overall metabolic health. Restoring metabolic flexibility lets the body switch from sugar burning to fat burning effortlessly. And this ability is one of the most powerful yet often overlooked tools for managing blood sugar and overall health. Many people operate in a state of constant glucose dependence, relying on a steady intake of carbohydrates to fuel energy throughout the day. This creates a cycle in which the body struggles to access stored fat. Insulin remains elevated and energy fluctuates dramatically. Metabolic flexibility is the body's natural ability to alternate between burning glucose and burning fat depending on availability. And restoring this flexibility transforms how energy is produced and used. When the body can efficiently switch between fuel sources, blood sugar stabilizes, cravings decrease, and the risk of insulin resistance diminishes. In modern eating patterns, metabolic flexibility is often impaired because insulin remains chronically high. Every snack, sugary beverage, or refined meal keeps insulin elevated, signaling to the body that glucose is a preferred fuel and preventing fat stores from being used. Over time, the cells become less responsive to insulin, which further limits the ability to use glucose efficiently. This dual problem, over-reliance on glucose and insulin resistance, leads to energy crashes, persistent hunger, and difficulty managing body weight. Restoring metabolic flexibility requires creating periods when insulin drops, allowing the body to access stored fat and switch between fuel sources naturally. This does not require eliminating carbohydrates. It requires giving the body the opportunity to regulate its energy use efficiently. One of the most effective ways to restore flexibility is through structured eating windows or intermittent fasting. By creating deliberate periods without food, insulin levels naturally decline, signaling the body to transition from glucose burning to fat burning. During these periods, stored fat is mobilized and converted into energy, stabilizing blood sugar and promoting hormonal balance. People who practice time-restricted eating often notice that their energy becomes steadier, hunger becomes more predictable, and craving for sugary foods diminish. This is a physiological response, not a matter of willpower, because the body has been given the chance to operate according to its natural rhythms rather than being constantly overloaded. Exercise is another critical factor in improving metabolic flexibility. Physical activity, especially resistance training and aerobic exercise, enhances the muscle's ability to uptake glucose and utilize fat efficiently. Active muscles act as glucose sinks, helping to reduce blood sugar after meals and improving insulin sensitivity. At the same time, exercise increases the activity of enzymes responsible for fat oxidation, making fat a more readily available fuel source when glucose is limited. This dual effect strengthens the body's ability to switch seamlessly between fuels and prevents dependency on constant carbohydrate intake for energy. Balancing macronutrients within meals also contributes to restoring flexibility. Incorporating healthy fats and proteins alongside carbohydrates slows digestion, reduces insulin spikes, and promotes steady energy release over time. This teaches the body to process nutrients more efficiently. The presence of fat and protein ensures that energy supply is sustained even as the body transitions between glucose and fat utilization. This not only stabilizes blood sugar, but also supports satiety and reduces a tendency to overeat, creating a positive feedback loop that reinforces metabolic flexibility. Sleep and stress management play significant roles as well. Poor sleep and chronic stress elevate cortisol, which increases glucose production and impairs insulin function. This hormonal imbalance makes it harder for the body to switch fuel sources effectively. By prioritizing restorative sleep and managing stress through mindfulness, movement, or breathing techniques, the body's hormonal environment improves, making transitions between glucose and fat burning smoother. This holistic approach ensures that metabolic flexibility is not only restored, but maintained over the long term. The benefits of restoring metabolic flexibility extend beyond blood sugar control. When the body efficiently uses both glucose and fat, energy becomes more stable throughout the day. Mental clarity improves because the brain receives a steady supply of fuel without dramatic highs and lows. Fat stores are accessed more readily, supporting weight management and body composition. Cravings for sweets or refined carbs diminish because energy is not dependent on constant intake, and the risk of insulin resistance is reduced because the hormonal environment is optimized. Metabolic flexibility creates a resilient system in which energy production, hormonal regulation, and nutrient utilization are harmonized over time. Restoring this flexibility leads to lasting improvements in health. Meals that once caused spikes in blood sugar now produce a controlled and moderate response. The body becomes more efficient at using the energy available from both food and store reserves. Energy levels remain stable even during periods without food, and hunger signals become more accurate, reflecting actual energy needs rather than hormonal imbalances. By focusing on improving the body's ability to switch between fuels, you unlock a sustainable path to better blood sugar regulation, more consistent energy, and overall metabolic resilience.